we had a ceremony and his son got up to talk. His dad was probably late 50s, early 60s. Son was in his early 30s. And he said, my dad made a commitment when he came to Cenikor that he wasn't going to die a drunk. And he said, my dad didn't. And he talked about the outings they got to have and getting to meet the guy that should have been his father and what that meant to him. You know, that's on one end. I remember we had a graduation and this little 5-year-old boy ran up and grabbed my leg and said, thank you for giving me my mommy back. The thing that's so wonderful about recovery is you see somebody on day one and the lights are not on. You know what I mean? They're just, they're hanging on. And when people come in for treatment, a lot of times it's kind of, they're at their wits' end. It was this or that. And you see them a few weeks later, they've got, 3 months under their belt, 6 months under their belt. All of a sudden you see this really happy person. They're smiling. And it's like, I forgot what it was like to be me.
Welcome to Brainwaves by Opus. I'm your host, Sean Rickenbacker. Today, we're speaking with Bill Bailey, President and CEO of Cenikor Foundation, one of the most respected nonprofit recovery organizations in the country. With nearly 2 decades of leadership at Cenikor, Bill has helped guide the organization through growth, innovation, and ongoing challenges in the addiction treatment landscape. Today, Cenikor supports over 1,000 individuals every day across Texas and New Mexico. This last fiscal year, they served 15,677 clients. We'll talk with Bill about his approach to recovery systems, his views on behavioral health access, and what it takes to lead a mission-driven organization in this space. Bill, thanks again for taking the time with me. It's great to have you on Brainwaves. Let's start by hearing a bit about your journey into this work and how you came to lead Cenikor. I read you joined Cenikor back in 2004. Is that right?
That's correct. And Sean, I appreciate the opportunity to be on here with you and doing a podcast with you is a real honor. And I appreciate that and appreciate the work that you and Opus are doing. So, my journey is probably not that unique, but maybe unique. I was a senior vice president for a health system and I had a corporate recruiter call me once a week for 4 weeks. And he kept saying, you need to take this job. He goes, this job is perfect for you. To be honest with you, I kept turning him down. And I finally told my wife, I said, I'm going to talk to him. And I went through a 6-month completely dysfunctional interview process. And I don't know about you, but I have a strong faith. And at 2 months in the interview process, I told my wife I was going to withdraw and I prayed about it and had a real peace and go through another 2 months of dysfunction. And I prayed about it again. And it was just on my heart not to step away. And so when I came to Cenikor in 2004, January of 2004, I was the 5th person with a college degree. We had less than 70 staff, and we helped about 800 or so people a year. And it was a very dynamic treatment program called a therapeutic community that was designed. Well, therapeutic communities came out of World War I. And it was individuals that were suffering what we call PTSD now. Then they called it shell shock. And an officer figured out that if you work with individuals that have had similar experiences, I was on a battlefield, you're on a battlefield. If you did that, it really helped bring the stress level down and you could have more meaningful conversations. Now I want to come back to meaningful conversations. And then the next thing he discovered is that people kind of plateaued. And so then they started having group counseling. And out of that, people moved forward and got better and could start to socialize. And it's when they really started to engage people in the community that you really saw them start to become themselves again. And so that's where Cenikor started. Today, we have moved on to much more of a medical model. We have a holistic approach. We have a much more of a mainstream approach, if you will, and a continuum of care. But I think today around 65% of our staff are in recovery. And having come from a hospital background, you didn't have to have a heart attack to be a good thoracic surgeon. But I will tell you, if your counselor is in recovery, they can see through your game way better than somebody who's not. And what we have tried to do here is have a great blend of people with lived experiences and those that have an educational background. And I had spent time prior to healthcare working at universities. And I'm a big believer in education, but I'm also a real big believer in common sense and lived experiences. And what we work at diligently is to bring those two together. At any given time, we have over 10, I easily 15, sometimes higher percent of our staff that are going to college that we're providing scholarships for. And because of that, you take individuals that have just unbelievable stories, personal commitment of what they've been through, and you give them that educational background that lets them take their lived experiences and their knowledge and package it, if you will, in such a way to share with their clients. And, we have staff that come in uh, and as frontline behavioral health techs, and we work with them to get their GEDs and get their history cleaned up, if you will, and get back into college. And we've got, I think, two of our staff that are working on their PhDs today, and several that have gotten masters, a lot of bachelor's degrees, a lot of associate degrees. And we try to meet our staff, our vice president for HR, Kelly, always talks about that, clients are our first mission, but our staff are our second mission. And so we pour into our staff because a lot of them are in recovery. And as you know, for a lot of people in recovery, it's hard for them to get that job. They're up against check the box. Have you had a felony? Well, you check the box, the job interview's over with. And because of what we do, we have a great level of empathy, understanding that sometimes people made bad decisions. And so, how can we give them a better foundation to make better decisions? And by showing that we believe in them, by giving them those educational opportunities, I think this past year we spent about $160,000 on tuition for staff to go to school. We have a leadership development program that our staff put together that has got 3 tiers, and we've now gotten up, we're almost 600 employees. So I think we've capped our leadership program now at 35, but our tier 1 get a 30-minute mentoring session with a tier 2, and it's to help them develop their leadership. And we have internet web-based programs that have like 4,000 different, little webinars, how to be a better time manager, how to do budgets, how to deal with the difficult boss, how to deal with a staff person who's always late, all the
Yeah,
basics.
yeah.
But they get to have those, and then they get to have a 30-minute a week mentoring session with somebody that's got more experience to help them. How do you apply this? How do you work with these things? Our tier 2 are individuals that have a little more experience, and it's a little more selective to become a tier 2. They get a $200 a month stipend. Uh, tier one get $1,000. Tier 2 get a $2,000 scholarship addition to the other scholarship funds. And if it's one of the tier 2 is the clinical manager, then they will host a 30-minute to 1 hour webinar for other clinical managers on best practices or something they've learned, or they'll work with somebody that has done something really creative. And then they'll teach all of our clinical managers how to do that. And so they'll do that like once a month. And then our tier 3 get $3,000 additional tuition. They get a $300 a month stipend. And then they usually get a special project to work on to help develop their leadership. And I think last year we had like 38 promotions from people inside the company that got promoted up. So it's one thing to talk about, oh, we need staff. Oh, we need to develop staff. We need, all this culture. Well, like I said, I think, we put all the money in the tuition. We put another hundred and something $1,000s a year into the lead program. And so when staff see you actually investing in them, and they see their peers getting promoted, it helps build a more culture of commitment to the mission.
Love that. Yeah. Having the right people, investing in them, like being mission driven is like, this is all stuff that I look for when I'm trying to, join an organization. And one thing with Opus is we are very mission driven as well. You said that back in 2004, Cenikor was working with around 800 patients a year, had 60 or 70 staff, and now you've got 600 and you're working with almost 16,000 patients last year. I read, correct me if I'm wrong, but Cenicor started back in 1967, right?
It did. It
Yeah.
did. I'm only the fourth president. I was actually, I'm the first that's came from the outside. Everybody else were graduates of the program. When I came, probably 80% of the staff are all graduates of the long-term program.
I guess a question I have is obviously you've grown so fast starting in 2004. What has contributed the most to Cenicor's growth?
Well, it's been over 20 years, so it may sound fast, but for those of us that lived it, it's been a little
It's
bit longer than that.
been a journey, right?
Been a journey. Well, we've increased the number of clients served in double digits for the last, half dozen years. And so a lot of the growth has really kicked in the last several years. I think several things have contributed to this. First, it starts with the great foundation is the committed staff that we have. It's a lot of people make a decision that they're going to leave treatment at 2 in the morning. There's not a clinician there. And the person they talk to is often a behavioral health tech, frontline employee. Well, that's the thing that's really, I think, wonderful about is that a lot of ours are in recovery. They're doing the night shift because they're going to school during the day. And so you're talking to somebody that may have been on the job 6 months, but they got a year in recovery, maybe 2 years, maybe longer, but they may have had 10 or 15 years
Yep.
of experience. And when they say, hey, you need to think about this, it's not a textbook that's talking. It's like, you think it's been tough. Well, let me tell you what tough looks, and it's just, it's that granular detail. It's that front line involvement that makes a difference. Let me share a story.
Yeah,
One
go
of
for it.
our staff was talking, and Michael, as they would say, had caught a lot of vacation. He'd been in- His vacation came courtesy of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And yeah, so they say caught vacation. He had caught 3 years vacation a few
Yeah.
times, 5 years, 10 years. Michael had gotten married. And there's an event going on at the facility. I've known Michael for a long time. And we were talking. I was like, Michael, I said, I got to ask you. I said, you got some experience. I said, who chooses to marry you? You know, uh, we had that kind of relationship. He goes, well, Bill, he met his wife at church. He goes, you know, I went through the program. I got my life squared away. I was doing the right stuff. And he stayed connected with us. And he goes, and came back to work for us after a few years. But he goes, my wife's first husband, he was in his addiction and never got out of it and all the destruction that brought. And he goes, I understood what their lives had been. But because of that, I knew where I was at and what I could bring. And, he felt it was the right thing to do. Anyhow, he was talking about that she had a 13-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter. And, the kids were trying mom on for size every day, right?
Yep.
They were being teenagers. And Michael looked at me, he said, the 13-year-old son was just, my friends are tough and my friends are all this, and Michael said, he goes, I looked at him and said, son, I woke up under a bridge every day for a few years. He goes, every morning I looked the devil in the face. I shook his hand. He said, I want your friends to know where I've been. I want them to understand. And he's smiling. He goes, I've got a great relationship with him today. His friends all know me, you know, because of where he's been and what he's able to bring. And it's taken those experiences that could be so detrimental and so crippling and finding a way to put it in light that it can add value to another person's life. And that's where, it's that success comes from those foundational experiences. It's having that level of commitment. It's you know, everybody knows your counselor is going to, give you great, counseling, and they're going to have good group participation. But it's when the cook stops and says, "Hey, you don't look like you're really doing well. What's going on?" And the cook's in recovery and they can start talking to you. It's like, "Well, look, let's have a little more mashed potatoes. Let's talk about this." It's having that level of commitment, I think, that really builds it. I'll say on top of that, we are very blessed to have an unbelievable board. Our board members, some are in recovery, most are not. Several have, family members that have experienced our world, and they bring such great business and educational and medical background to what we do, that as we have gone through a lot of challenges the last 5, 10 years, I have the ability to pick up the phone and call an expert that we couldn't afford to have, to get tens of thousands of dollars of wisdom and guidance. That's just their contribution. Too many organizations, they've got a lot of people that are 12 steppers. Nothing wrong with that. A lot of people that, have a compassion for it. They've had a loved one in it. When we're dealing with banking issues, I've got a board member who recently retired as an executive vice president for a nationwide bank that handled $250 billion of credit a year. If we want to talk about credit, I call Pete. You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
it's some really good
Absolutely.
insight. I've got board members that have done a lot of mergers and acquisitions across the country. And we have been blessed to step in 14 times to keep other nonprofits and communities from losing those services and going out of business. And doing mergers and acquisitions is not something you think of an average nonprofit. Well, of our 16 board members, 13 have had direct contact with mergers and acquisitions. And it's really interesting because I've got people from all sides that can say, well, look at it this way. We've got the chief nursing officer for one of the largest health systems in the country on our board. Well, we have a nursing question. It's not, well, who do we ask? Well, we have a PhD in nursing.
Yeah.
And so it keeps us from stumbling over little obstacles. Because we have that kind of level of committed staff, that kind of committed board, that kind of knowledge and commitment, it lets us run into battle, not walk. It lets us charge opportunities in front of us, not be fearful. And it's really fun. And it's hard, I guess, to put fun in substance abuse treatment, but
Yep.
it's fun when you see an organization that is trying to do good in their community, but they're just struggling for the little things, and we're able to come alongside them, and all of a sudden they go, uh, you know, program in Dallas that joined us. They were serving less than 300 people a year. Now we're serving over 1,200 on our way to 2,000. And it's just, they only could see what their limited resources let them see. And we were able to open up the doors and say, here, rather than just doing, inpatient for men, let's do inpatient for men, women, detox. We're going to add outpatient services, medically assisted treatment, recovery housing, and bring in recovery support specialists. It's our continuum of care. Wasn't us going, here's something for you. Our continuum of care came from our clients saying, we need one more step. And our desire is to come alongside them on their journey of recovery and to be their partner. How do we help give you the foundation so that the steps that you're making, if you will, on new legs have a much more firm feeling because of us being able to stand beside you?
I love that. I love that. It's like you said earlier, a lot of people that are in recovery make or do a great job. If they talk to the cook, that's like, hey, you don't look like you're doing all right. Let's talk about it. You've essentially built this community. I mean, I talked to a lot of recovery centers, community being number one, and you built this community of people who just get it. I love that. I love that. I mean, obviously, we've talked about this fantastic network you have. Like you've got that nursing PhD and banks. So you've got this great network of people to help. Obviously, back in 2004, I can't imagine you had such a robust network. If you went back and you told Bill back in 2004, like, hey, these are some of the challenges that you'll come across. This is what you need to prepare for. What would you tell yourself?
It's a season and enjoy it. I will tell you, I don't think that back in 2004, there was times it's like, we're going to pay this bill, but not that bill. They're going to give us, 60 days to get that water bill paid. So let's just wait until,
I
um,
get that.
today we're in a much different place. It's not the challenges, it's the richness of the people. When we were a smaller organization, I had weekly, if not daily, contact with our clients. And because of recovery being what it is, I got to know a lot of them. Today, I don't have that same ability. I mean, we've got as many staff now. We have more staff today than we had clients then. And I used to know everybody's recovery story and their life story and their kids and sometimes grandkids. And now I run into staff that I've never met. I miss that. And so what I would have told me then was enjoy it because you're going to miss some of it. You know, Having the financial security that we had been able to create through the success we've been blessed with, you know, changes what you think about, but it doesn't change the mission. I'll give you an interesting thought. We just finished our fiscal year. It ended the end of June. This past year, we spent $5.5 million more on serving state clients than the state of Texas paid us to serve them. Okay. We pay for the privilege to work with indigent, underserved, economically disadvantaged people. HHSC calls us their gold standard because they realize the investment we make, which is, it puts us in a different place because over half of our clients are indigent, but they provide less than 40% of our revenue, 35% of our revenue. But because of the wonderful work that we do, we're able to have direct contracts with Native American tribes, active duty military, veterans, insurance companies. The thing is that for a lot of individuals that um, are young in their addiction, they still have homes and families. And I like to say the only difference between somebody who has insurance in their addiction and somebody who doesn't have insurance in their addiction is time in their addiction. Because often the people that we see that are homeless, that have been homeless for years, 10, 15, 20 years earlier, had a family, had started a career. And for a multitude of different reasons, their addiction took control of their life. I've met a lot of on the street heroin addicts. I've not ever met anybody that was their career goal.
Yep.
It just, for 5 years, we had an in-prison program for dual diagnosed women for 192 women with the state of Texas. And of the first 72 women that were brought in the program, 70 had been physically, sexually, or emotionally assaulted as adolescents to the point that they had a CPS case. And this has been years ago, and I had the opportunity to sit down and get to talk to a lot of them. And you start to hear their life experiences, and you start to understand man's inhumanity to man is without limits. The amount of abuse and neglect that often was put on people at an early age contributed to their life choices. It's not that, there are people I know that think that this is glamorous and they're going to get into drugs and they think but for the most of the people that we deal with, it's, it's life circumstances. They found themselves trying to deal with an environment they were in that was just so chaotic. That's how they did it. Or it was so much substance use is just generational. I mean, Parents start kids on drugs, they, for a multitude of reasons, none of them are good. And you, you find that they're just trying to survive. And, you know, the, the thing that's so wonderful about recovery is, is you see somebody on day one and the lights are not on. You know what I mean? They're just, they're hanging on. And when people come in for treatment, a lot of times it's kind of, they're at their wits' end. It was this or death. It's that bad. And you see them a few weeks later, or you see them in recovery housing or outpatient. They've got, 3 months under their belt, 6 months under their belt. All of a sudden you see this really happy person, they're smiling. And it's like, I forgot what it was like to be me. The thing that I have seen over the years is the first thing addiction takes is your humanity. It takes away your ability to love yourself. And when you lose that ability, you lose the ability to love others. And so people just become transactional to you. And when people get on the other side of the addiction and they get back on solid ground, if you will, back into their life, all of a sudden you start to meet this person that they used to be 10, 20 years ago. We had a gentleman that went through our program, was with us for almost 2 years, recovery housing and stuff. And he passed away, long time addiction, long-term alcohol. And we had a ceremony and his son got up to talk. His dad was probably early 60s. Son was in his early 30s. And he said, my dad made a commitment when he came to Cenikor that he wasn't going to die a drunk. And he said, my dad didn't. And he talked about the outings they got to have and getting to meet the guy that should have been his father and what that meant to him. That's on one end. I remember we had a graduation and this little 5-year-old boy ran up and grabbed my leg and said, thank you for giving me my mommy back. Well, you know, I got to have those experiences all the time when I first got here when we were smaller. I wasn't called here to feel good. My background's accounting and finance. I build systems. And it's more important that we serve 15,677 people than I get to have personal stories. That's not it feels good. It gives me, I don't think I don't like them. Man, I want them. I go meet clients. I'll be talking to clients the end of this week and spending time. And it re-energizes me. But my skill set is in how to create systems and environments so that we can reach more people and how we develop that. And so, I think it's responsible for each of us to use our skills to the best of our abilities. And if we do that, and if we all do the best we can, then we're going to make a more meaningful impact on humanity. We're going to do more to help the people out there because there's so many people hurting. Their fault, others' fault, nobody's fault. It just doesn't matter. You got to find a way to reach out, find them where they're at, and then help them move forward.
Absolutely.
It's it's a great encouragement to be able to do that.
And like you said, obviously we love that part of the job where we get to see these great successes people have, like these graduates you said, and how it changes not only their lives, but their families' lives, their friends, etc. But we got to balance it. Like you said, you come from the accounting and finance background. You got to build those systems. It's almost your calling to help people at scale as opposed to one to one. How have you, I guess, for somebody that is looking to scale their behavioral health practice, help more people, what advice would you give somebody who's kind of on that fence and they want to help people on a one-to-one scale, but they need to help people from your perspective?
We have a very unique business model here. And it started, 16 years ago, I guess now, blending. People either say, well, I'm going to go nonprofit. And, they try to do it with state funding or county funding and, raise money. And they're always short. They're always, they can't quite do what they need to. They're driving vans with 400,000 miles on it, hoping they'll make it another week.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of that. Or they go for profit. Well, then they're always trying to please the insurance company. They're always trying to make this happen. They're always trying to balance the clients, and you've got to keep enough people in the door because otherwise you got to furlough staff, right? You don't, and so you're always, you know, you're fighting these different monsters, if you will. You know, we run a blended program, which thank God we have got a very sophisticated accounting system and accounting staff that is just wicked smart. Our CFO, Matt Coleman, is just as good as they come. And, insurance clients go up and down. And because we serve indigent clients, we have a steady stream of clients. And so we're able to keep our facilities at an economic level. So insurance sits on top of that. So we're able to blend those two that gives us economic success. So we built our buildings large enough. I mean, we right now have 500 licensed beds in Texas and 50 plus in New Mexico. And 12 months, we'll have another 100 beds in Texas, plus another couple of hundred recovery housing beds. So we operate on a large scale, but because we have such volume, we can serve all of the indigent clients that come to us, but we have the capacity to increase the number of insurance clients, veterans. We have contracts with Native American tribes. And so we're able to personalize the service delivery to the individual. We're able to say, okay, you know, we have a group of clients that have experienced homelessness. Well, let's have a group for them. We have a group of clients that are Native Americans. Okay, let's bring them into a group. We have veterans and active duty military. Okay, let's let those guys come together and ladies. For people that have suffered trauma. And so by having enough mass, if you will, it gives us the ability to flex to meet individual needs and put them together with individuals that have had similar experiences back to the therapeutic community. You know, it was for people, you know, if you had PTSD and having somebody that has come straight out of medical school talk to you doesn't resonate. It just doesn't reach, where you've been.
They don't get it. They
They
don't
don't.
feel what you felt.
But if you can have somebody that may not have been on your battlefield, but on a battlefield, if you have somebody that maybe they were a heroin addict and you were a meth addict, maybe, it's a different, but they can relate to each other in a way that somebody that's not in recovery can't. And, I mean, one of the things, I mean, because I've heard some of our staff say, when people go, it's tough and I can't do this. You did tougher things in your addiction. Can't you do this for your sobriety? Well, I can't say that, but somebody has got, that had 15 years of addiction that now has, 10 years of sobriety, and they can resonate all day long.
They've lived that experience. They've got that credential.
Yeah. Well, it's
It's
back to Michael.
unreplaceable, you know?
Michael's statement was, I got up every morning and shook the devil's hand. You scare me.
Yeah.
Okay. you know, and so it builds a bond of trust and understanding. Cause I think I had one of our clients describe about job interviews and checking the box. And he goes, the thing I realized is they were going through the resume and they saw that I checked the box that he didn't just have one, he had 6 felonies. He goes, the job interview was over with, but he goes, they wanted to keep talking. They wanted me to tell them about my life, explain that to me. He said they wanted the color commentary, you know, they had
Yeah.
never experienced that. They wanted to see what that, and he goes, coming here, it's like, you know, staff person he's talking to is like, you got 6, I had 9. Okay. That's yesterday. Let's talk about today. Where's tomorrow going to take you? To be able to be freed from that and not feel shame or guilt. So just kind of be like, yeah, I have a blue shirt on today. Okay. Well, we all got blue shirts on. So now let's talk about tomorrow. And it just, man, when you just see people have been beaten down, and they've just, their fault, others' fault, nobody's fault, but just life has just beat them down. and they can't get things to go their way. And you put them in an environment where all of a sudden they're whole, they're appreciated, they're appreciated for who they are, not for where they've been or what they have. It lets them start to build out. And, I think that's our thing is we're just very mission driven and we're very committed to building that foundation, giving people that shot.
Absolutely. And speaking of Cenikor being mission driven, what is your mission for our listeners?
Yeah. Um, Cenikor is a place for change to provide better health and better lives. It's real simple. We want to come alongside people in their journey to recovery.
And like you said, building better lives is not just for your patients, it's for your graduates, it's for your employees, and you're able to invest in that community that you've built. I love
Yeah.
that.
I mean, we just had an alumni event and had 87 alumni come back. We're now trying to do alumni events every month, if not every 90 days. We have what are called recovery support specialists. We had some state funding for that. The state funding went away with a lot of the budget cuts here earlier this year. We just self-funded it. We believe in recovery support specialists so much that we just picked up those 5 staff and said, we'll fund it ourselves. Back to having the blended model. It wasn't like, well, you're on this contract or this grant and it went away. So I'm sorry. It was a $500,000 commitment, but it's like, we're going to make it happen. So we do. That's the nice thing about being a nonprofit. We don't have any shareholders. There's nobody going, well, hey, did you make the dividend this quarter? Well, we were looking at, our staff turnover. It's higher than we want until you step back and say, hang on, we hire a lot of people that nobody else will hire. We take chances on people that come in and the first week they do good. And guess what happened the second week? They relapse. Well, damn. Okay. Well, they can't go to the program that they were working at for treatment, but good news, we've got 12 other locations. Let's get you back into treatment. I mean, substance use disorder is a relapse prone disease. I've gotten to do 2 congressional briefings in DC. And one of the speeches I gave was, if you have diabetes, you don't go on insulin for 28 days and you're called cured. You're on it for the rest of your life. And if you're a diabetic, if your grandmother is diabetic and she has a second piece of pecan pie at Thanksgiving, nobody calls the police on her.
Yep.
But what happens to our clients? They get treated in such a way that their life is a scarlet letter that they wear forever, and they can't get to the other side. If they have a slip, okay. Heaven forbid, if somebody has cancer and they have a reoccurrence of cancer, nobody blames them for having a reoccurrence of cancer. Nobody says, my gosh, you had melanoma and now you got lung cancer. Well, you did something wrong. Well, it's never looked at that way. And I don't think, individuals that are dealing with substance use disorder, man, until you've lived their life, you can't judge it. You just
Absolutely.
can't.
Absolutely. I know we're coming close on time, so I only got
Yeah,
a couple more
sure.
questions,
I'm
but
sorry, I go long.
hey, you're good. I mean, it's great because I love to hear more about Cenikor and of course the journey there. But what's next for Cenikor?
So, I said that we've stepped in 14 times to keep nonprofits from going out of business, the community losing services. I think that is our core, is to make sure that services are not lost. And it's to bring our business model, because what we do is we step in with nonprofits that don't know how to do insurance, how to bring in direct contracting. And we bring that, which all of a sudden they go from they can't afford to operate to they can now afford to operate and provide services. That's one. Second thing is a lot of almost all of our facilities have nurse practitioners. They're doing primary health care. We have now started billing for primary health care in New Mexico, and we're looking to expand primary health care, because one of the things I realize is that for a lot of people in their addiction, you know, when they get back in recovery and they go see a doctor for a health issue, they may not say, hey, by the way, 10 years ago, I used to have this addiction. They just don't. They don't think it's relevant. And in a lot of respects, it's not. However, from a healthcare standpoint, it might be very relevant. And so we're wanting to expand primary healthcare so that our clients can come back to see our doctors, their doctor, And they don't have to tell them, hey, yeah, 5 years ago, I had a 10-year meth addiction. It's already in their health record. So the doctor knows, hey, when I prescribe something for you, I need to take that into consideration so that you have a better outcome.
Absolutely.
And so it's it comes back to, this is a partnership. We're committed to their recovery. Can't be more committed than the client is, but we're going to be as committed as they are. And it's finding how we can meet them where they're at.
I love that. Honestly, Bill, this has been a great conversation. I know you said that you tend to tell these stories, but I think it's fantastic. It's great to hear this sort of thing. So one last question I want to ask. I always ask this,
Sure.
but do you have any book recommendations?
Yeah. Two seconds. I'm going to tell you two books that you'll be surprised
Okay.
about. When I was interviewing for this job, I was reading this one, Good to Great. And I realized in my career, I'd worked for a lot of companies that have been good, but I never worked for one that was great. And I went back to the recruiter who was chasing me, and he said, this is your chance to be CEO. And I thought, you know what? If I want to step up to the challenge, this is it. And so I did it. The other one is Factfulness. And this is an obscure book that was written by a Swedish doctor that talks about poverty around the world and what it really means. And the bottom line is we're better off than we think we are. And it's just appreciating the little things.
I love that. I haven't read either of those, and I'm big into books, so I'm excited to check them out. But I appreciate the insights that you have, and this has been a fantastic conversation. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, Bill.
Hey, Sean, I really appreciate your time and Opus, and I appreciate the work you guys are doing because it's important to get a good positive message out to people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.